welcome to the show. Ron Mars is back. Man, I can't believe it's taken this long to get you back on the show. Welcome to the show, bud.
Thanks for having me back, dude. It's good to see you again.
You too. I'm excited because this is the first time you've been back since my team and I covered Silver Surfer Green Lantern. And so we have a whole new appreciation for that incredible crossover that I never forgot you had a poster for in the background. And still have now. And man, was I jealous of it when I first saw it, and I still am today. I'm like,
I think I actually have two. That's a rolled one. Which were rare because they all came out of the printer folded so they can send them to comic shops. And
sure.
They saved a few from being folded, and sent them to the office. And I went up back in the halcyon days when I could get on a train and go to the DC offices rather than on a plane, and picked up a few copies of the unfolded version.
Very nice. So how have you been? You just got back from a trip out to India, of all places. How was your trip?
Boy, are my arms tired. Good. Trip was great. I mean, the fact that I get to go to the other side of the world because I write comics is insane.
Yeah.
And that, obviously this is a very different world than the one in which I broke into comics, 30 some years ago, as but a child, frankly. But it's just the rest of the world is caught up with our culture, in some ways sort of, sublimated us into their culture.
Very true.
But yeah, I mean, you go to India and, I don't say this to, pat myself on the back, but there was a line 30 people deep to get autographs and selfies.
Wow.
For the entire weekend. And that's just insane to me.
Absolutely.
People in India have some sense of who I am and what I do and what Green Lantern and Silver Surfer comics are. It really is sort of a universal language at this point.
Yeah, comics are the universal language. That's going to go on some kind of book at some point. I have a question for you in regards to that, which is that the furthest you've gone for comics? Is that the furthest you've had to travel for comics work?
No, I think probably in terms of flight time,
Mm-hmm.
New Zealand's the furthest.
Nice.
Which I've been to twice, South Africa twice, Kenya once,
Wow.
and other places that don't have 15-hour flights attached to them. But
Sure.
Honestly, it's the best part of the job as it stands now is just this incredible range of opportunities. You get to go places where you never thought, I never thought I'd get to New Zealand, not once, much less twice.
Yeah.
I take advantage of all of that stuff as often as I can. I think they're announcing another international show for me later in February. They'll announce it, and it's taking place in April. So it's the travel is a delight, frankly.
That's great.
And I know, look, there are some of our comic brethren who want nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
Who don't want to put themselves out there and be too far from McDonald's at any point. And that's okay. That's a personal choice for everybody. And but man, just the fact that I get to go be in the middle of Nairobi, Kenya, and and see a dude wearing a Thanos t-shirt, that's not a made up thing. That's, when I was in Kenya, there was a guy that came past the table wearing a Thanos t-shirt by Jim Starlin. And I thought, man, that's sort of all worlds leading to the same place.
It's true. The impact you guys have, it's easy to think of it as a localized enthusiasm, but it has far-reaching implications, even irrespective of the movie arm of things. We're just talking about just the comics. And
look, this job is, I generally sit in this room and make stuff up by myself. And then you get to, get on a plane, fly for 16 hours or whatever it was, to India, and there's a line of people that want you to autograph their comics and their posters and take selfies with you.
Yeah.
The Indians are serious about selfies.
Really?
And everybody gets a selfie. Yeah.
Interesting. That's kind of fun.
So you got to be prepared. Like, so you have to make the decision of,
what am I going to wear?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously that, because comics people are known for their sartorial splendor.
Indeed.
Says in his LL Bean hoodie.
Exactly.
But you have to make the decision. Well, am I going to stand the entire day so that you do the grip and grin for the photo,
right? Or you going to sit down and stand up,
and down and up and down and up and down. So
yeah.
That's obviously first world problems.
Absolutely, yeah. But it's an interesting problem to have, where it's like, okay, I got to figure out what footwear I'm going to need. Nah, anyway. We're getting into the real meat and potatoes of this of the logistics of international comics travel. You also mentioned before we started how you were working on Diablo 4, and I was like, how did that come to be? Can you tell me more about like your writing work when it comes to video games?
I have been working on video games on and off for the last, I don't know, 10 years. There's a local developer here in Albany called Vicarious Visions. Mm-hmm. Which was an independent developer, worked on a lot of different games. I worked on Marvel Ultimate Alliance and Spider-Man and Skylanders, a number of things. They would call me and say, "Hey, can you come in and help us out for 3 months with this thing?" Or, get us across the finish line for, the next Destiny game or whatever. And then about 3 years ago, going on 4 years ago, the studio had been purchased by Activision, and that's why I ended up doing Skylander stuff for them, which was great. Which is like, frankly, writing old Warner Brothers cartoons. And then the studio got handed over to Blizzard, which is part of Activision,
right? And
I got a call to say, "Hey, would you like to work for us?" And, we sort of talked about the negotiations of, what the job was going to look like and what you get paid and all that stuff. And so I've been doing that ever since. And it's been a great experience. And now, obviously, Blizzard is owned by Microsoft.
Oh, yeah.
Then the big corporate merger that went through last year, but it hasn't really changed much of anything in terms of how we approach the game. So a good deal of my time is spent in Sanctuary doing terrible things to characters that you like.
Which is the hallmark of any great writer. I mean, you have to put them through the ringer. Otherwise, what's the point?
Well, that's really, I mean, it's a cliche, but it's true. It's, if and I know there's a certain segment of fandom that doesn't want anything bad to happen to the characters.
Sure.
And it's like, well, then it's just a tea party.
Yeah.
So actually in Diablo, one of the things that we discuss on a not infrequent basis is how do we balance it? Because it's a grim world and a rough game, and bad things do happen to characters, but the contrast, you have to give some light next to that darkness, or the contrast doesn't really work.
Exactly.
So I'm one of the guys who's generally saying, well, how about we get the good guys a win once in a while, so that you feel good about that, but also that there's more of a contrast when bad stuff does happen.
Right.
I think Game of Thrones, the TV series, not necessarily the novels, but the novels too, really, was instructive in terms of the grim nature of the bad guys always winning and terrible things happening to the good guys. Just got to be too much for me. And I think for a lot of people, but so before they got to the last two seasons, which sucked the life out of the thing, I was out. I had enough. When something turns into torture porn, it's maybe that's somebody else's thing, but it's certainly not mine, and I'm generally going to step off.
Yeah. It's too bleak. I understand the lack of appeal for that. So, in addition to the work that I'm excited to get into. I also was curious regarding. I saw your name on a couple of books recently where I was like, "Hey, where did that come about?" Which was first it was Silver Surfer Rebirth, and then it was Adam Warlock Rebirth, um, which I guess is like you're like since it's really only the two. I was gonna say like it's this new Rebirth series or saga that we're that we're seeing in research and stuff. But can you tell me where that came about? Like how that did you call
Um,
Marvel? I got more. I got this other idea for for the surfer.
I guess, like, honestly, most things in my career, it's somebody called and said, "Hey, you want to do this?" Okay. Marvel called and said, and literally called, and I got a note from the editor Darren Shan, who had actually worked with at DC a number of years ago.
Hmm.
Darren's over at Marvel now, and he dropped me a note and said, "Hey, do you have time to talk to me?" Sure. And he said, we'd like to have you come back and do more Surfer. Would you be interested in that? And I said, well, if Ron Lim comes back, I'll come back. And apparently they had the same conversation with Ron, where
funny.
he said, well, if Ron Mars comes back, I'll come back. So that was, I mean, it sounds very simple because it was.
Yeah.
It was a 10-minute conversation of, do you want to do this? Okay, sure. What do you guys want? Well, just do a story that's set somewhere in your run, and it can be very specifically between issues 72 and 73, and panel 4 of page 7,
Right.
or it can be it can be more sort of general, and I chose general because I'm not a huge fan of stories that wind themselves in and around other stories, because I don't know, that seems continuity should be continuity should be a tool that you use, not the other way around. So we just came up with a story that seemed like it would be fun, and then turned us loose on it. And it was a little odd at first because I hadn't written the Surfer in a number of years, and
Sure.
it was so it was like flexing muscles that you sort of thought were still there, but you weren't quite sure.
Mm-hmm.
And within half dozen pages, it was like, oh yeah, I remember how to do this.
Yeah.
And then the pages came in from Ron Lim. The pencils came in. It was like no time had passed at all. It was just like we had peeled away all those years, and we're just right back at it. And it was simple and easy all the way through. Just a real pleasure. And Marvel was very, there wasn't a whole lot of editorial input other than, hey, we need that next script now.
Yeah.
But in terms of pushing us in one direction or another on the story, the only real requests were, like in the first one, were, hey, can we put Jack of Hearts in there? And I was like, all right, whatever.
Interesting. So they even for books that are set during your run, they have ideas about characters that would like to appear, even if it's kind of like a flashback.
Yeah, oddly enough, like, hey, Jack of Hearts, and I was like, well, okay, but that costume's a bitch to draw.
Yeah.
Thank you, George Perez. So I said I got to check with Ron and make sure that he's cool with drawing that.
Right.
And I assumed he would be, because he's the happiest guy on the planet.
Sure.
And refuses nothing. So he said, oh yeah, that's okay, fine. And then we got through the first mini, and he was like, oh, drawing that Jack of Hearts costume sucked. So Marvel asked for Jack of Hearts, and they asked for Janice Vell.
Sure.
To be in the story, who ended up, and it's like Ron and I created him, so I think people assumed that they were like, oh, those guys wanted to get their boy back in the series, but it was a request from Marvel that we have him in there for reasons I never really got an explanation for, which is totally cool.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, he became the bridge to tie all three of these minis together.
Yeah.
And sort of the character stuff was really more about him than anybody else in the stories, because Surfer is, to a great extent, who he is.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's really cool. I was just curious about the formation of that kind of thing that occurred over the last couple of years, because I'm like, this is really neat that it just kind of popped up, and it's like, did it give you kind of an itch to keep going? Where you kind of like, yo, by the way, like, I don't see no Silver Surfer series on the docket for the next couple of years. You guys interested in just kind of like riding this wave, so to speak, into into the 2025s?
Well, I mean, we would certainly be willing. I think I've seen Ron in a number of shows lately. Not in India. Ron was
No.
not, one Ron at a time in India, I think.
Right.
And we would certainly take a look at it and be willing, because we had a ball. But plans change, and I think in the case of the Surfer Rebirth stuff, the editorial chairs changed. And Darren got moved over into the X-Men office, and which is not an unusual occurrence.
Oh, sure, people.
So it then became like, oh well, who's in charge of the Cosmos books, and nobody quite knew at that time. And I think it's certainly a conversation we would like to have again at some point, because we had a ball doing it, and apparently people liked it, and they sold copies. This is a shocking admission, but publishers like when you sell books. They're somewhat profit oriented. So if you could do a series that sells some copies and pays for itself, puts some money in the coffers, they are prone to going, oh, let's do that again.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So getting into kind of like what made me think, oh my God, I haven't talked to Ron in like 5 years, was the omnibuses that came out from DC and Marvel. And you and I actually talked a little bit, either on social media or through email, about how like you were tapped and you were surprised by how much like information was like how much they put into it. But before we get into the formation of these beasts, how shocked were you that was even a conversation that was being floated, much less a thing that was moving forward?
Oh, entirely.
Right?
Came out of nowhere. Because I had always assumed that, well, that's, we're not going to see that again.
Yeah.
we got a JLA Avengers reprint as a, last gift to George Perez, and a gift to Hero Initiative from George, really.
Yeah.
But all of these things had fallen out of print. And Marvel versus DC had been out of print forever.
Yeah.
I think there was an initial trade paperback after we did the 4 issues, and that was it. And I just figured, well, that's never, a decent chunk of what I've done in my career is crossovers, right? Because I love doing them. I got a lot of calls for them. So, Batman Aliens, Green Lantern Aliens, Batman Tarzan, this whole list of things in addition to Green Lantern Surfer and Marvel versus DC. I just figured, well, we're never going to see those again. And frankly, I'm never going to get royalties off of those books again in my life, because they're just out of print. But then the email came from DC, which handled most of the editorial work on the books, to say, hey, we're going to do this. A, you can't tell anybody.
Right.
B, we would like you to be involved in helping us put this together and writing some stuff. And because frankly, the editors who put the books together.
Oh, they probably weren't even alive.
They were kids when the books came out.
Yeah.
So they were psyched about it, because these things were touchstones for them as kids.
Right.
But also, when you're 12 or whatever, you're not as completely aware of what's going on, and you don't have a full grasp of maybe what was out there. So we spent a lot of time both on email and on Zoom calls to figure out, okay, well, here's a list of stuff that I know came out with it. Here's the ballots that we used for Marvel versus DC. Here's some of the amalgam artwork that appeared in Wizard. There were just so many odds and ends all over the place. And to their credit, and particularly Alex Gaylor for the Amalgam Omnibus, which I think has even more back material than the Marvel versus DC crossover one.
Mm-hmm.
Just beat every bush and turned over every rock to find stuff. Now I had a fair amount of stuff in my files,
Yeah,
in literally a filing cabinet sitting next to my desk, that I had just squirreled it away for posterity,
sure.
and hadn't looked at it since the books came out. And I said, well, I think I have some stuff. I think I have some documents, and I ended up having a lot more than I thought. I had a lot of memos that are in the book now.
Yeah.
Went back and forth between Marvel and DC, and I also had my original notebooks from the initial meetings. So, like, my handwritten notes are in the back of
Oh,
the Amalgam omnibus,
that's awesome.
along with scripts and extras and odds and ends. So, like, all of this material, I ended up boxing up and sending out to DC to say,
Do what you will.
here, here's stuff. Here's what do with it what you will. And frankly, some of the memos, I thought, well, they'll never put this in the back of the book because this
Sure.
is too inside baseball. This is like what other creative teams could have been considered if they
Oh,
could. There was stuff here that I thought they would just keep under wraps, and apparently somebody said, "Screw it, put it in there." Um, so I think there's 200 plus pages of back material with
oh,
both memos and handwritten notes and text, as well as all of this artwork that was just sitting in somebody's flat file somewhere,
yeah.
or a number of somebody's flat files. Like,
Right.
I had, and I believe these are in the book, the Doctor Strange Fate designs that Jose Luis Garcia Lopez did,
Hmm.
but I had fax copies of them.
Oh.
Right, I had like the crinkly fax paper stuff
Yeah, it's all like kind of,
that is of the era, but they were still in decent shape.
yeah.
So that went into the box too, and that got sent out. So uh, yeah, it's very much a time capsule of everything that we did at that point. But I'm a big proponent of getting all that extra material into these sort of high end price point volumes.
Yeah.
And I was, when they sent me the initial PDF of, this is, we're still working on things, we're still tweaking things, but this is what we're looking at. I was shocked at how many extra pages, because that frankly costs money.
Oh, sure.
Adding,
Yeah.
adding extra pages to the book costs money in printing, and it costs money in time and effort and all that to put it together. And really impressed by the love that went into putting the book together, um, with the thought, honestly, that this might be the only time we get to do this.
Right.
This
Exactly.
this might be the representative volume of all of this stuff. So let's do it right. Let's not cut any corners.
Yeah. Well, and I remember because when they made the announcement, I pre-ordered it immediately, and every 6 months or so, I saw the date change, and I was like, oh, geez, here we go. Like, it kept going from like, oh, it's coming out this month. Nope. 3-4 months after that, and then there was an announcement, actually not too long ago, where they were like, we had to pulp it and we had to start over, and I was like, oh, this is never coming out. Like, I'm just one day I'm just gonna quietly get a refund, and we'll just hopefully some intrepid young intern will leak the PDF and we can just enjoy it that way. But as far as you were concerned, it was happening. Like, you knew.
Oh yeah, the whole time I knew what was going. They were keeping me updated, and look, that putting together a 1,200 page book, much less two 1,200 page books,
Right.
um, is hugely time consuming, and takes, obviously, everything takes longer than you expect.
Yeah.
No matter what you're doing. So it was a question of racing the clock to get the stuff on press, and to get stuff on press in Asia, because it's much more cost effective to print there than here.
Right.
But then you have to build in time to get the books shipped from there to here and into the distribution system. And
Yeah.
it's a books this size are just a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
No matter which way you cut it. And this had the added layer of, Marvel and DC had to sign off on everything.
Oh, that must have been exhaustive. Like, the way that DC probably had, things that they were not happy with and Marvel was okay with, and vice versa, and just this constant like back and forth. I mean, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds about it because I don't want to put anybody under any, pressure, but was it like a struggle, or was it kind of just a
Look, I was insulated from that for the most part.
good? That's frightful.
That's why the editors were getting paid what they were getting
Yeah.
paid. But from my standpoint, it was a smooth process with just some negotiation of, well, we want to include this, we don't want to include that, and you got to get everybody aligned on how this is going to work,
Right.
And you got to look. These are multi-billion-dollar franchises now.
Yeah.
Which they, of course, were not when we put these things together.
Right.
We did this stuff, it was just comics.
Right. Exactly.
Now it is not just comics. So there are bigger and more invested corporate parents who are part of the process. And there are more people and more lawyers looking over everybody's shoulders.
Sure.
It's just the nature of the beast at this point.
Yeah.
All that said, it's both volumes are really a hell of a testament to the hard work that the editors put in on it.
Absolutely. Could you believe when that, I remember, and this is, you're old hat at this point when it comes to oh, I got some art on my desk. I'm sure it was exciting, but I know when I saw that Jim Lee was doing direct market covers, I was like, oh, they're really treating this thing with they're getting serious with this thing. Oh my God. And then you saw it and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, they had sent me the scans of Jim's pencils and Scott's inks and then the colors for the covers, and I was like, oh, well, that's pretty sexy.
Right. Yeah. I may have both. I found there's a couple websites that they offer discount trades, in stock trades, for example. I may have 2 copies of each of them just to get those covers. By the way, those covers are also available within the volumes. You don't have to buy both to get those covers. You can just, Jim Lee's cover folds out from I think it was who did the original cover for Amalgam, the other cover, which was
Dave
also
Gibbons.
Dave Gibbons. Thank you. I was like, it's somebody. It's a big name. Dave Gibbons did the cover for the original trade, or at least one of the original trades for Amalgam when it was put into floppy trade paperback, and then they reprinted it here. But yeah, man, really cool, really exciting. That blew my mind, and I'm so thankful that they made it a tome that was just choked with back matter and information and all this stuff. I'm only sad that we couldn't get. There was I don't know where it aired because I missed it as a kid, but there's a little video of Mike Carlin and Mark Ruenwald doing a kind of boxing match promotion for DC versus Marvel, and I was like, it's a video, you can't put that in the book, but just there was so much out there, but they didn't put those cards in there, which is pretty cool.
I was the Marvel versus DC cards was high on my list of stuff to get into the book because I wrote the card backs. And and not from oh, it's my stuff, you should see it, but just sure. I thought that the cards gave us a place to show off a bunch of meetings and battles and things like that we didn't have room for in the main series, because the main series was, I don't know, 120 pages, something like that. Maybe 130 or 40 at the most.
Yeah.
So we got in everything that we could, and hinted at other things, with big spreads and montages and things like that. But doing this kind of project, there's never enough room. There's never, you never have the room to get in everything you want, because you want to get in everything. You want to get, you don't want to have Hawkeye and Green Arrow stand next to each other for a panel. You want to, you want to have a 10-page story about what they're doing, but there's just no room. So the cards were a spot where we could show off some of the cooler things that we just ran out of room for in the main book. And a lot of the card pairings were sort of left over from the initial meeting that we had at Mark Grunwald's apartment, when we were just all sort of hashing out how this was going to work. And I still had my notebooks. They're in the back of the book, of, oh, it would be cool if, I don't even know, obviously the obvious ones like, Quicksilver and the Flash and
Sure.
those sort of one-to-one kind of meetings that you want to see, but also, other weird stuff like, Spider-Man should fight the Riddler and
Yeah.
all of that stuff. So we got a chance to indulge a little bit on those. Although, honestly, everything had to be produced so quickly. We had to hit the ground running on all of it, including the cards, because the idea was to get this stuff into shops and
Right.
to have a product in the shops that would be putting money in the cash registers of the shops and keeping the stores open, because this all came about because the industry had gone into a bust period after a boom period.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what we always do. And this was Marvel and DC's attempt to keep shops open.
Yeah. I have to ask this because it's always been in the back of my mind when it comes to this this phenomenon. When Wizard was reporting on it, they lamented a thing that I, even as a child, was like, "There's no way they would ever have done this." But to your recollection, was there ever any discussion about doing Marvel versus DC / Amalgam action figures?
To my knowledge,
or was it just too? There was, like you said, the advanced timetable. There's no way you can like sculpt, mold, print, like you can't make figures in the amount of time that book took.
To my knowledge, no. Toy Biz, which was inextricably linked to Marvel at the time,
Yep.
Could have been a factor in that. I'm not sure, but if there were discussions for that sort of thing, it was way above my pay grade.
Gotcha.
I'm sure that we could have sold a bunch. I'm sure we could sell a bunch now.
Yeah.
But I don't have a huge amount of faith that we'll ever get to that point, because I'm just happy that we got the books out.
Oh, seriously, yeah. I think we're closer now than ever to get Amalgam figures, given the McFarlane of it all. Like,
I mean, that would be the obvious
Marvel
place, and it seems like they would do a hell of a job.
Yeah, that'd be neat.
As mentioned previously, publishers like money. So
right. Obviously, the Amalgam thing, when it first hit the scene, bunch of fun combinations of characters, and it became this whole initiative that like rolled out with a bunch of amazing books. When the time came for DC Marvel All Access, the miniseries that follows the crossover, there are a couple of Amalgam characters that pop in as a result of that Access kind of hodgepodges. I think it's like Superman and Bishop and Cyclops and somebody. It was just a whole bunch of kind of odd pairings, and I was just curious: were those just we're doing this story? It's just what he can grab, or were those ideas that you had from the initial meetings that just?
I think those were those came about afterwards.
Okay.
Because initially there was not a we're going to do Marvel versus DC, and then we'll do Amalgam, and then we'll do an All Access miniseries. That
right.
It was just the fact that the relationship was good. We sold a bunch of copies. Everybody was looking for more, so it was just like, oh, okay, well we'll do more, and and that character that Marvel and DC co-own is kind of the fulcrum around which of all this stuff is going to pivot.
Yeah.
We actually got access into an issue of Green Lantern, which which in retrospect, I'm like, how did we get? How did
that happen? I know. I have that issue.
And then I think actually when that Green Lantern issue, I think it's 87, was initially reprinted, they pulled those pages out.
Really? Oh,
it was not. It was not approved. So, but those pages are now in the omnibus volumes.
Oh, hey.
So we just had to wait 25 years or whatever it is to put those pages back in context. But it just, it was not there was not a phalanx of lawyers sitting at conference room tables bargaining this all out. We just kind of went, well, it'd be cool if we put that dude in our book and just, kind of tease that there was another one coming.
Yeah.
Because that's what it was really about. It was just like, oh, well, if we can, stick him in a few pages of Green Lantern and get people aware that there's more to come,
Yeah.
that would be cool.
Right.
You tease something in this issue, and then people go buy that issue.
Exactly.
The all access stuff was just the next iteration of this to try to keep the brand going and try to keep money flowing into the comic shops.
Right. So DC versus Marvel, the whole elephant. How happy were both sides when it came to its success, so to speak? Like, was everybody like, I mean, obviously things came out of it. You did 2 sequels to it, more or less, but were they like, we should do this all the time? Or was it kind of like all right, that worked. Like we're doing okay. Like, was it a modest success, or for you was it a unprecedented success?
It sold really well. It did what it was intended to do, which
right.
is
It got asses in seats. It made people show up to the shops.
Yes, get people excited. Put dollars in cash registers at stores. Give the stores a way to hopefully get people interested in the monthly books in which these characters appear anyway. And that was that was obviously one of the discussions when we initially sat down to do this, which was, are we portraying the characters as they are now, which is why Ben Reilly is kind of sort of Spider-Man in this. So we call him Peter.
Yep.
Or are we doing sort of the iconic versions of all of these characters that everyone is most familiar with? And I was on the iconic versions side. Yeah. I wanted to do, like if you know them from Super Friends or from, Marvel Animation, that's the version we should have in here.
Yeah.
The standard iconic version. And this was pre-cinematic universe for anybody.
Yes.
Which is why, Iron Man gets like one panel.
Yeah, he doesn't get pitted against anybody.
But the decision was made, and I see the wisdom of it, even if I didn't necessarily agree with it. The decision was made that, like, look, we're trying to get people to buy comics.
Right.
So let's put the versions of the characters as they are right now on the stands in comic shops in this thing, and hopefully that has some carryover into the titles.
Right.
So it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It got people excited. And then, the relationship with the company, between the companies was good. Everybody was happy. Everybody made some money. So it continued until it didn't.
Right.
And I think to a great extent it continued until it didn't. When it didn't, it was because of corporate stuff, not editorial stuff.
There's no bad blood. It was just lawyers.
Well, it was lawyers. It was new regime taking over at Marvel and kind of wanting to maybe not play with it's not play with the kids across the street. You want to do your own thing and show why your characters are better. And so look, there are a myriad reasons of why we didn't do more.
Oh, sure.
There was in the back of the book. There's actually my proposal for the All Access 3 miniseries, which obviously we never ended up doing. But it was it would have been All Access Amalgam or something like that, where the Amalgam characters would have come back and the adventure would have been set in that universe.
I like that.
Which made all the sense in the world, and I think everybody wanted to do it, but it just there was no longer corporate will to get together. To put corporate differences aside and keep this going. So it's sort of one of the unchecked boxes on my resume is that we never got to do that one.
Yet, I mean, who knows? These omnibuses that they keep. I mean, like, the thing is, I feel like when something sells, it's the same attitude they had, 25 years ago. It was like, 30 years ago. The idea of like, hey, if money's on the table, let's take it. You know what I mean? Like, if there's a demand, can we just?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's, if we can sell, everybody agrees to do a profit making project.
Mm-hmm.
way before they agree to do a artistic, lovingly
sure.
crafted money loser. That's just the way of the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the relationship was good for a few years, and everybody was happy. And then things, deteriorated to the point where they no longer wanted to play with each other.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, that's a shame. But also, it makes this period where we actually got to do these things a little bit more unique and special because it was finite.
Right. Yeah, that's true. It's a real snapshot in time. And I think like some of those moments where it's like, yeah, it would have been probably at least a more evergreen idea to make all the iconic, like classic versions of the characters pitted against each other. But Thor only wore that costume for like 6 months.
Yeah.
And there it is. And so you can immediately place when that was.
Unfortunately, there it is.
There it is. And he's fighting Captain Marvel, who looks like Captain Marvel. Before they couldn't use that name anymore.
Right.
And I love it as a fascinating snapshot in time, and that like you can fill 2 huge volumes in it. Does it drive you crazy that there's the omnibus that collects the crossovers is called DC versus Marvel, but DC versus Marvel is in the crossover is in the other omnibus?
Makes me a little crazy,
right?
There was much discussion as to how we were going to split all this stuff up.
Sure.
And for a while, the Green Lantern Surfer crossover was gonna lead off Volume 2 because it was the last one that came out before DC versus Marvel, and the last page of that story is a teaser for DC versus Marvel,
right.
Which in the context of not knowing that DC versus Marvel was coming, that page makes no sense whatsoever.
Right.
It's like a complete non sequitur, leaving people to go, what the hell? What are we? I don't have any idea. This was a cool story, and it ended with what?
With this weird question mark, yeah.
Cardboard box in an alley. But eventually they decided, look, let's do all the crossover things in one volume, and then all of the versus stuff, the Amalgam stuff, the Access stuff in a second volume. And I think the page counts are somewhere in the ballpark of each other, so it makes sense.
I think it makes sense. I'm glad they split it up that way, but but I was like, DC versus Marvel's here, DC versus, all right, well, whatever. As long as I'm getting them, I don't really care. I'm willing to forgive a lot because I'm just like, oh my God, I have them. That being said, they printed a lot of them, folks. So like, even if there wasn't an omnibus, you could go get them. Like they're out there. Not all the crossovers, but all the Amalgam books, all the DC versus Marvel copies. They printed a lot of copies. They're all over the place.
They're in back issue bins somewhere.
Exactly. Some jerk always collects them and then tries to sell them for $50. But trust me, like don't let them. But now you don't have to. You can just get the omnibus. You mentioned a book that is near and dear to my heart, and I just have to talk about it again, even if we may have talked about it in the previous episode. But we're 5 years removed, so it's like it's a new episode anyway. Batman Aliens. Oh my God, what a dope book!
That was great.
Bernie Wrightson, man, that was a killer book.
That guy's all right if you like that kind of thing.
If you like that kind of thing, if you like awesome books that represent each character in a fantastic way. I had the first issue, and for a long time as a kid, I didn't know there was a second issue.
Oh, wow.
I thought it was just kind of one of those fun, like, cliffhangers.
So you're like, man, this is a cliffhanger that sucks.
Well, I was just kind of like, oh, yeah, so the alien, like, there's an alien somewhere. Maybe one day they'll do a sequel. And then I found issue 2. I'm like, oh, son of a bitch. There's a whole story here.
There was actually it reminds me, there was a guy at, I think it was Raleigh, GalaxyCon Raleigh last year, where I was a guest, who came up and with his copy of Batman Aliens 1, got it signed, and he was like, oh my God, this was like the first comic I ever bought. My mom bought it for me, and at the time it was like a $5, $6 book, which was fairly expensive, and it was square bound prestige format.
Yeah.
And he said, I was a little kid, and I'm like, I don't know if your mom should have been buying you that one. There's some rough stuff in there. But he said it really imprinted upon him. and he never got issue 2. Like, and still had not gotten issue 2. Like, so we had no idea how the story ended.
Oh,
You know, like what. And so I signed this guy's book, and I said, well, look, I'm not going to spoil it for you.
Right.
You know, but maybe somewhere out there,
in
it's
this
issue 2. And like a day or two later, it was like, it's a 4-day show. You know, 4-day shows are an ordeal, but I think either Saturday or Sunday, he came back to the table and he had found an issue 2. Nice. And was just like, I need you to sign this and I'm going to go home and read it.
Oh, you didn't get the full experience. He didn't read it like in his hotel room. Like, oh my God, finally. I hope he enjoyed it. It's really cool. Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened? Like, where did that come from? Is it just corporate as we're doing Batman Aliens? Ron, you want
to? No, that one completely came from me and Bernie.
Really?
Because I lived at the time. I lived in Woodstock, New York.
Oh, cool.
Literally a mile down the road from Bernie's house.
No way.
And you know, I had been friends with Bernie for years, right? And since I was like 16 or 17, and we were actually when I first got married, we were renting a house that was sort of back in the woods and literally across the road from Bernie's house. Oh. So we rented that house for a year or two. It was a house on a cliff. We actually got snowed in there one year. We got like 3 feet of snow, and it was this long driveway through the woods, and there was literally no way to get out until the snow melted.
Yeah.
We eventually had to pay a bulldozer to come in and get us out. But you know, so for like a week and a half, I would hike out to the end of the road. Bernie would pick me up and take me into town to get groceries, and then come out, and I'd have to hike back to the house. Wow. But anyway, like while we were renting that house, a new construction went in like a mile down the road from Bernie's towards Woodstock, and we ended up buying that house. And so for about 5 years, we lived literally a mile and a half from each other. So I think he and I were coming back from maybe a convention in the city. We were in his car and just shooting the shit about what would be cool to work on. Mm-hmm. And Bernie's the one who said, how about Batman Aliens? And I'm like, because Dark Horse had just gotten the Alien license, and they were, you know, or had it for a little while, but they were starting to do things with it. And I said, well, that'd be cool, but they'll never let us do it. Yeah. That's too many people. That's DC and Dark Horse and 20th Century Fox. And, you know, how would that even work? And he's like, well, I don't know. Let me make a call. So Bernie, you know, like the next week, Bernie called Dark Horse and said, hey, we got this idea. What do you think? Mm-hmm. And they went, oh, that actually sounds pretty cool. Let's talk about that. And within a couple of weeks, we had gotten a green light. Everybody signed off on it. And then we realized that we didn't have a story.
Right. All you had was Batman Aliens.
We had Batman versus Aliens. That was it.
That's all it takes, really. I mean, when you think about it.
We got a call from Dark Horse with the official go-ahead from Bob Schreck, who was a buddy and was going to be the editor.
Yeah.
And we got the go-ahead, and then they went, so what's the story?
Yeah.
And we looked at each other and went, oh, shit. Batman fights the aliens, I guess.
Like, I hope you got more than
that. So, you know, we hung out at Bernie's studio and kicked around ideas to come up with what is eventually in the book. And a lot of it came from me saying to Bernie, well, what do you want to draw and what do you not want to draw?
Yeah.
Because that's the first conversation you should have with an artist every time you work with them. Mm-hmm. Because part of your job as the writer is to give the artist something cool that they're excited about.
Yeah.
And Bernie said, I don't want to draw buildings. And I don't want to draw cars.
Well, we're in Batman here, but
good
right.
call. Yeah. So that's why the story ended up in the jungle in Guatemala, I believe. Mm-hmm. No buildings, no cars.
Yeah, that's right.
lots of foliage. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, a lot of greenery, a lot of maybe
not a lot
one
of
pyramid.
not a lot of straight lines.
Hmm. No, that's true.
And frankly, the rest of it, like the setting came from um, a number of years before, a few years before. Um, I had been down in Mexico with Jim Starlin, exploring Mayan ruins.
Is that a
Just
thing you guys used to do, or is that just like
why? Yeah, it was.
Ron's like, "Hey, Ron, I'm going to I'm going to Mexico. We're going to check out ruins. You want to go?" And you're like,
Yeah, I mean, Jim would spend Jim and his wife, and for this trip, Jim Sherman was down there, who's also a artist, mainly 70s and 80s Legion of Superheroes, and they spent the winter down in Mexico, just in a van, not down by the river, but sometimes down by the river, driving around, just hanging out, just
"Oh,
doing not even tourist things, but just sort of living
living the van life."
living cheap. And so Jim had said, "Do you want to come down and meet us?" So I couldn't have been more than 20 or 21 or something like that. And
Oh, so everything's a yes. I mean, obviously.
oh yeah, why not? So flew to Mexico City, spent the night on the floor in the Mexico City airport. Flew to a place called Tuxtla Gutierrez in southern Mexico, where Jim was going to pick me up. And I mean, we landed a jet on a dirt runway that was carved out of the jungle.
Nice.
And so I'm like, what the fuck?
What are we doing here, man?
I wander, and there's no jetway. They roll up stairs and you climb down the stairs, and
Yeah.
and you wander into the airport. And I don't even think there were like customs or anything like that. You just got off plane and wandered into the jungle. And like there were, we were far enough south in Mexico that there were Guatemalan rebels who were having incursions into southern Mexico, and like firefights and stuff like that. Wow. So there were federal troops like everywhere.
Yeah.
Which was, I'm a 20-year-old kid from upstate New York. This is not what I'm expecting. Mm-hmm. So there are federales with every dude's got mirrored sunglasses, every dude's got a mustache, and every dude's got a submachine gun. And they're just everywhere. They're just hanging around, looking for rebels. And so that was my welcome to hey, you're going to spend the next 3 weeks in Mexico.
Oh, it wasn't even like it was a couple of days. No, we were talking 3 weeks.
No, it was 3 weeks, and we went to a lot of ruins, some of which were like just still sort of half reclaimed by the jungle.
Yeah.
And obviously that made a big impression on me. We did ruins on that trip, and we did some spelunking. We went into caves in the mountains, a place called San Cristobal, La Casas de la San Cristobal. And I had no way to know this at the time, but apparently what we were doing was really dangerous and stupid.
Yeah.
Because it was the rainy season.
Oh no. Yeah.
So, quick anecdote, the morning that we were going to go to this caving system, and we stayed in the San Cristobal, which was this sort of colonial town, but with a lot of Mayan underneath. And the morning that we were going to go do this spelunking thing, which was the big, sort of the centerpiece of the trip, Jim Sherman was in the bathroom in the hotel, in the restaurant, all morning. Oh. He kept running back and forth to the restaurant, and I'm like, geez, like he's running back and forth to the restroom. What's going on? Mm-hmm. And he's like, I'm fine. So finally we go drive up into the mountains, get dropped off at the cave, and the cave is, it's not like going to Mammoth Caverns in Kentucky. It's a cave.
Yeah. And
you go in, and there's a walkway that is partially collapsed in for about 100 feet. And then it's just dark.
Yeah.
And then it's just, I don't know if you know this, but under the earth, it's very dark.
I always thought there were like at least lava men that would light things up, but that's interesting. It's just mostly darkness and shadow.
So we went in and I think we went in 2 or 3 miles and down a couple miles.
Oh my God,
like following. No, it was insane. Like I look back at it and go, what was I thinking?
Right.
And so we go in and there, you have lights clipped to you and you're geared up and you're, wriggling on your belly to get through crevasses and climbing up. And so we go and we're following like maps that had been drawn by an Italian explorer group that had gone through like 10 years before.
Okay.
And I assuming like subhuman creatures got them and they never came back out.
Right.
But,
yeah, they found the map.
But the like there were white arrows painted in spray paint on the walls of the cavern to tell you where to go. It was their marks.
Oh my God.
But you had to follow that stuff. And so we go in a couple miles and go down a couple miles, and we finally got to a place called the Ice Cream Room, which were these huge stalactite and stalagmite formations of I guess limestone, because they were very white. So it looked like a room full of ice cream cones.
Sure.
And that's where we stopped for lunch, because we had all brought lunch, and you're burning your torches and stuff like that, your flashlights.
Yeah.
And finally, we sit down for lunch, and I said to Jim Sherman, "Well,
what happened in there?
What was all that, back and forth to the bathroom?" And he's like, because both Starlin and Sherman had done this before. They had done these caves before, so I was the new guy. And finally, Jim Sherman, admitted, "I'm all right. I was just scared shitless to do this again." What?
Again? Oh, God.
And I'm like, why didn't you tell me that this was a really bad thing to do?
Right.
We planned it. I didn't want to chicken out.
Right.
So,
oh my God.
So, the point of this whole thing is that, and eventually, obviously we got back out. And
oh yeah, you made it.
I twisted my ankle and our flashlight stopped working, and it was a mess to get out. But
yeah.
5 o'clock that day we get out, and it's raining. We get back out of the cave. We get picked up by Starlin's wife and Sherman's girlfriend, and it's raining. And then that's when they said, "Oh, it's a good thing the rain held off."
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" Well, if it's the rainy season, so if things had gotten really wet, the caves could have flooded and you could have drowned.
Exactly.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah. No.
So anyway, the point of this is that I went and did that stupid thing, frankly.
Right.
In the caverns, as well as Mayan ruins and all that. All of that stuff came out in Batman Aliens. So yeah,
I assume you regaled Wrightson with like all kinds of tales of daring do while you were in the in the jungles of Mexico.
Well, Bernie and Jim were best friends really, and so
so how come Wrightson didn't go on these awful on these
well, yeah, he was smart
enough to go. Oh no,
and I got back and told Bernie this stuff, and he's like, "Yeah, you shouldn't go places with Jim."
Oh yeah, no, I learned long ago. Yeah, you make up an excuse. I also noticed that the girlfriends did not go.
They did not. They were much wiser than we were.
I'll wait in the car.
And frankly, it was a lot. Like I don't know that I've ever been that tired in my life as when we got out of the caverns and then went to get pizza, because
pizza.
if you've escaped death by a whisker,
yeah,
what you want is Mexican pizza.
Hell yeah. Oh yeah. Was it any good, by the way? I have to ask.
Best pizza I've ever had in my life.
Well, sure,
yes. Alive.
You were alive.
I was alive.
Oh man. Well,
I think that was actually that was the first time I ever had pineapple on pizza.
Really?
Like, so that pizza meal was the first time I ever had pineapple. So
You have an
pineapple on
affinity for it.
pizza. Yes. Because I lived to tell the tale, and I
Exactly.
would have eaten anything at that point. So
Oh my God, man. I will never read Batman Aliens the same way again. Thank you for that story. And thank you for giving us some insight into the whole process and all that. There's so much more, but let's leave it at this and then see each other hopefully sooner than the next
sure.
5 years. But Ron, what's going on next? Where can people find you?
They can find me on Twitter. It'll always be Twitter.
Damn right.
Um, Even though it's a hell site run by a
Yes.
Nazi.
Yeah.
But God damn it, I was there before he was, so I'll outlast him too.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm on Twitter. It's just at Ron Mars. I'm on Blue Sky, Ron Mars. Website is ronmars.com. And, what's coming up is I'm doing some more stuff for Savage Sword of Conan. I'm working on some creator-owned things with a couple of my artistic brethren. It's hard to, hey, you want to do a thing? Sure, let's do a thing.
Right.
And then there's other odds and ends that haven't been announced. And obviously, work on Diablo 4 continues apace. We've gotten the big game out. We've gotten the first expansion I worked on quite a bit is out as well. And then I'm working on other stuff with the franchise that we haven't really announced yet.
Okay.
So I never wonder what I'm going to do that day when I get up in the morning. There's always
something.
There's always something hanging over my head, which is,
Absolutely.
Again, first world problems, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a good problem to have. Well, Ron, thanks for being here, and we'll see you guys next time with another episode here on this channel. Bye, everybody.